Welcome to another episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches, where we cover 5 of the most interesting breaches of this last week. I'm Steve.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Frank.
This week's episode is brought to you by hackers with too much free time, because if they use their power for good, we'd have flying cars and universal healthcare by now. Instead, we've got telecom leaks, cloud security nightmares, and AI spilling its secrets like a gossiping coworker. Let's break it down. Number 1, Home Team NS ransomware attack. Hackers versus Singapore's finest. Singapore's Home Team NS just had the worst kind of ransomware attack. Shut down their servers. While they managed to contain the breach, nobody knows what data, if any, got stolen. So now everyone's just awkwardly waiting for the hackers to either spill the tea or disappear into the cyber abyss.
So I'm not too familiar with Home Team. It looks like they are some sort of club for the national service, maybe current or previous members from national service in Singapore. So I'd imagine they might have some information, maybe names, addresses, phone numbers at a minimum on individuals that may be part of the national service, which could be secret operatives. Who knows? They mentioned they contain the breach. Not sure what that means at this point, but if there is sensitive military, government, personal records that are compromised, that could have serious implications on national security. So I guess we will wait and see if the hackers ever spill the tea, or if we never know what was exfiltrated.
No evidence of extraction yet. They are now working with authorities and third-party experts, admin passwords, upgrading their firewalls, words, all the things they should have done before getting.
Moving on to story number 2, Orange Group breach. Hackers go bonjour to French Telecom. Orange Group, aka one of France's biggest telecom providers, got hacked and thousands of internal documents leaked, exposing both customer and employee data. No exactly what was stolen yet, but considering this is a major communications provider, let's assume it's really bad. We saw some pretty major telecom breaches here in the US, everything from AT&T to Verizon to T-Mobile. We saw state-sponsored groups, I believe it was China, collecting everyone's text messages, and now we're seeing Orange Group have their own incident. What do you guys think?
I've got some thoughts on this. So you mentioned T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, right? So here in the US, those are probably the 3 biggest providers of telecom. And it seems like a yearly occurrence of data breaches for those companies. Each time, it's very sensitive information, right? As a consumer, we have to provide social security numbers, phone numbers, addresses, name, etc., to be a customer. So that's compromised. Also, text messages, phone calls. Who knows what else they're able to retrieve. I know I've personally been affected by these events. So now we're seeing a large telecom provider in France going through the same thing. So first off, I feel for the consumers. Hopefully it's not as bad as what we've seen with telecom providers here in the States. It also brings up other thoughts, right? It's not just individual consumers that use these services. There's also many businesses that utilize these services as well. So maybe there's sensitive phone calls, text messages that are potentially compromised that have intellectual property, other information as well. So interested to see if this does have any a larger boom than we may expect from a supply chain perspective.
They claimed they had access for over a month, just chilling inside Orange's systems, probably downloading files while sipping some coffee. And on the day of the exfiltration, 3 whole hours before Orange ever even noticed. Question is, if someone's in your house for a month, takes everything about it, is that really called burglary or a long-term relationship?
I believe in Paris they would have squatters' rights by then. I wonder if that applied to the servers. I mean, they were in the servers for a month. I think they should get some universal basic income and squatters' rights for a few months at least. All joking aside, this is obviously going to be very concerning. breach because Telecom has all the data, right? It's all the communication for the Orange customers, for politicians, and we've seen those types of breaches have geopolitical implications. So everything from leaked text messages between FBI agents and every sort of geopolitical issue you could imagine. And France is most certainly in the world stage right now with negotiations around Ukraine and Russia and their ongoing war. We'll have to see what happens out of this one. Story number 3, Zapier Breach. Automate your tasks. Zapier is a popular automation tool that connects apps and workflows, and they accidentally automated a security disaster. A breach may have exposed customer data, and while they've secured their systems, they're still figuring out what actually got stolen. It's never good when the connector, central system that's connecting all of your other systems, is breached. It's never good when they're still figuring out what was stolen. We've seen a lot of these web applications be targeted, especially web applications that have access to other systems. Those are going to be prime targets. What do you guys think about that?
My conclusion is that it happened because of an employee's account misconfiguration, just one bad setting.
Yeah, and also going back to what Steve said about this being a central web application that has access to a multitude of other applications with the goal of automating the tasks. Along those lines, if threat actors add the access, that use case may have applied for automating the threat actors use case as well. So we'll see what comes of this. It's kind of crazy to think about the connectivity between other web applications, the data that may be hosted within those web applications, and what threat actors may have had access to. On a serious note, Frank, to your point, we've seen that phrase a lot where we don't think it's that bad, we promise. And 3-4 months later, we find out it was that bad. As a consumer, I would recommend taking the worst case approach in terms of incident response and assume that your API keys, your customer credentials, anything like that has been compromised. Cycle those, get new API keys, reset your credentials, make sure you have MFA. Because this could be something that compromises data much more than just what you have in Zapier.
All right, this one hits a little close to home. Microsoft Copilot and GitHub. We exposed all of your repositories breach. So cybersecurity firm Lasso just found a flaw in Microsoft Copilot that led to thousands of private GitHub repositories being leaked. Who's affected? IBM, Google, Tencent, PayPal, Microsoft itself, all allegedly, but basically every major tech company you've ever heard of who happens to be using GitHub. The leak included intellectual property, secret tokens, access keys, all the good stuff. This was a little bit of a complicated data mismanagement that involved GitHub repositories that ended up being indexed by Google as a part of their training data, and that training data was somehow allowed to be exposed, or is in like a Bing cache or something. It involved multiple Microsoft resources all working together to expose a lot of private data. As anyone that's familiar with code is aware, is going to be a concern, right? That's not necessarily like a data breach. It's more exposure of private repositories, but the API keys could be used for malicious purposes. Microsoft says they've taken action on it, but who knows what the long-term implications are going to be. What do you guys think?
Repositories indexed and access credentials exposed. Yes. While the firm that uncovered this mess noticed the problem when their own private repo popped up in Copilot suggestions. Like, why is our private project being suggested by an AI tool? This is a prime example of AI security risks. AI models don't just process data, they retain and regurgitate it unpredictably. If data briefly goes public, it might permanently get absorbed. Microsoft eventually patched the issue, but this opens up a good discussion. AI is what happens when it learns something it wasn't supposed to.
Aside from that, when you think about information being leaked from the world's largest source code host, companies that invest heavily into software, AI, R&D, a lot of trade secrets that they're working on that are probably hosted in private GitHub repositories. This is probably one of the biggest nightmares they could think of. Hopefully, this is a learning lesson from an AI perspective in using AI tools securely, AI products securely, but something that's very scary from my perspective. Hopefully we learn from this and it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I think one of the most concerning items is GitHub has not directly contacted the repository owners to let them know if their repositories have or have not been exposed. So we all have to sit in this limbo, this purgatory of maybe our code's been exposed, maybe not. But the joke's on the hackers. Most of that code doesn't work. So good luck.
Isn't that bad?
Our last story of the day, Rubrik. So Rubrik is the cybersecurity company that specializes in data protection. They got their own log server breached, potentially leaking authentication keys. And to fix it, they had to rotate all of their keys, which is tech speak for, oh crap, reset everything before the hackers do what they're going to do. So I agree. Resilience does mean being ready for anything. And in this case, they were not ready. What do you guys think about that?
So it's a tough one, right? This is a company about resilience, protection, data privacy, and threat containment as well. It's kind of like a locksmith getting robbed or an alarm company forgetting to turn off their own alarms. In seriousness, if authentication keys were exposed, that's leading hackers directly to access potentially to client data, right? They could essentially shut down systems. Who knows what they would have access to? So we'll wait and see how much was contained and what was compromised. This is kind of similar, but a central hub connected to a lot of different data backups and data repositories. Interesting to see the irony of this event, but also the potential boom here is massive once again.
I got some more irony. No ransomware here, no threat actor demands. It's just a data security company selling backup recovery and gets breached and has to reassure customers that their data wasn't touched. Like the locksmith getting locked out of its own house, or a firefighter accidentally setting their own kitchen on fire. And I believe this isn't the first time. If I'm not wrong, they got hit last year with that Fortra Go Anywhere breach.
Go ahead, Frank.
No, please.
You know what this log server could use? There's this company called Rubrik, and I hear they're really good at data protection and resiliency. So I hope part of their response is we're going to install Rubrik on the server to make sure that Rubrik is protected through Rubrik.
That sounds like a data breach inception thing.
Our data is now protected by Rubrik. There's one salesperson inside of Rubrik. Like, what if we sold it to ourselves? Infinite money.
You're killing me.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Bourbon and Data Breaches. Which breach did you think was the most concerning? Was this a better or worse week from prior weeks? We don't know, but it certainly has been interesting. If you liked everything you saw today, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you didn't like anything you saw today, that's all right. Please like, comment, and subscribe anyway. And with that, thanks, everyone.